Welcome back to another Excel tutorial. In this video, we're diving deep into advanced VLOOKUP techniques that will take your data analysis skills to the next level. If you're new to VLOOKUP or need a refresher, I recommend checking out our previous video on the basics of VLOOKUP to get up to speed. We covered the fundamentals there, so be sure to watch it if you haven't already. Now let's get started with some advanced techniques. The first advanced technique we'll dive into is using VLOOKUP across multiple tables on the same sheet. Imagine you have two tables, one containing employee information and another with manager information, as shown in this example. Our goal is to populate the manager column in Table 1 with the manager names from Table 2, based on each employee's department. Manually entering this data would be tedious, especially with larger datasets. Instead, we'll use a nested VLOOKUP to automate this process quickly and effortlessly. Simply put, a nested VLOOKUP involves placing one VLOOKUP function inside another to handle more complex searches. To do this in cell G3, we will start by typing an equal sign followed by VLOOKUP and then an open parenthesis. In a standard VLOOKUP formula, the first argument inside the parentheses is always the lookup value. Since the second table doesn't have unique details about the employee that we can directly use, we'll place another VLOOKUP inside the first one. This nested VLOOKUP will first retrieve information from Table 1, which will then be used as the lookup value for the main VLOOKUP to find the corresponding data in Table 2. To retrieve the department information from Table 1, we'll first specify the lookup value, which is the employee ID in Table 1. Next, we'll specify the table array, which will simply be the range of cells in Table 1. Once that's completed, we'll specify the column index number. Since the department is the third column in Table 1, we will enter 3 as the column index number. Lastly, we'll select false to indicate that we want the formula to return an exact match. We will then close the VLOOKUP function with a closing parenthesis. What this VLOOKUP does is look up the employee ID and retrieve the corresponding department, which will be the return value, and serve as the lookup value for the parent VLOOKUP. With that in mind, we continue the formula by specifying the table array for the parent VLOOKUP, which will simply be the range of cells in Table 2. Next, we'll specify the column index number. Since the manager column is the second column in Table 2, we'll enter 2 as the column index number. Finally, we'll select false again to indicate that we want the parent VLOOKUP to return an exact match based on the lookup value provided by the inner VLOOKUP. We will then close the formula with a closing parenthesis and press Enter. As illustrated, the formula first looks up the employee ID provided in Table 1, retrieves the department name, and uses that as the lookup value for the outer VLOOKUP. This value is then used to return the corresponding manager for the department. That being said, let's proceed to copy the formula into the other cells to fill the entire column. Oops, we encounter a familiar issue. When we examine the VLOOKUP formula closely, we'll notice that the cell references are adjusting as we use the fill handle to fill the columns. Consequently, the formula returns an NA error when the table array for both the inner and outer VLOOKUP goes out of range. To prevent this issue, we will use absolute references for the table arrays, which will keep the references fixed no matter how you drag the formula. We will do this by simply adding $signs before the column letter and row number. With that completed, we will press Enter and use the fill handle to populate the entire column once more. As demonstrated, the NA error disappears once we use absolute cell references for the arrays in both the inner and outer VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP across multiple sheets. Many times you'll encounter situations where information is scattered across 2 or more sheets, and you need to pull specific data from either one based on a lookup value. The fundamental difference when using VLOOKUP to reference data from a different sheet rather than the same sheet is how the table array or the range where VLOOKUP retrieves data is specified. For data on the same sheet, you simply input the range normally. However, when referencing data from another sheet, you need to include the sheet name in the table array reference, as shown in the syntax. So going back to the previous example, let's say this time we have the same two tables, one with employee information and another with manager information. Now we want to fill the manager column in the employee table with manager names from the manager table, which is now located on a different sheet. To accomplish this, we will use a nested VLOOKUP, just like in the previous example. Keep in mind that everything remains the same, except for the table array in the parent VLOOKUP, where we will need to include the sheet name since it is on a different sheet. With that said, in cell G3, we will enter an equal sign followed by VLOOKUP and an open parenthesis. Also keep in mind that, like the first example, we will first use an inner VLOOKUP to retrieve department information from table 1, and the department returned will then serve as the lookup value for the parent or outer VLOOKUP. Therefore, inside the parenthesis, we will type another VLOOKUP followed by an open parenthesis. Inside the parenthesis, we will specify the lookup value, which is the employee ID from table 1, followed by the table array, which will be the range of cells from table 1. Let's remember to add absolute cell referencing to our table array to avoid an NA error when we copy the formula to other cells, like in the previous example. To do this, we will insert $signs before the column letter and row number. Next, we will specify the column index number, which is 3, since the department is located in the third column. We will then select false for an exact match, and then close the parenthesis of the inner VLOOKUP. This inner VLOOKUP provides the lookup value for our outer or parent VLOOKUP, so we will proceed to add the table array, column index number, and range lookup to it. To do this, we will navigate to the second sheet containing the manager information. Excel conveniently adds the sheet name reference automatically when we click on the sheet, so all we need to do is select the table array. Next, we will enter 2 as the column index number since the manager is located in the second column of the table, and select false for an exact match. We will then close the formula with a closing parenthesis and press enter. As demonstrated, the formula accurately populates the cell in sheet 1 with the manager's name from sheet 2. Let's go ahead and use the fill handle to copy the formula to the other cells. As demonstrated, we have successfully populated the manager column in sheet 1 with the manager names from sheet 2. This method is particularly valuable when working with large datasets, where manually copying data can become tedious and prone to errors. Using VLOOKUP across multiple sheets simplifies the process and ensures accuracy. The final topic we'll cover in this tutorial is the index match combination. While it's not exactly the same as VLOOKUP, it can be used to perform vertical lookups and much more. In fact, in certain scenarios, it might be the preferred choice over VLOOKUP due to its flexibility. One key limitation of VLOOKUP, which you might have already noticed, is that the lookup value must always be positioned to the left of the value you're trying to return. However, in practice, datasets don't always follow this structure. That's why it's essential to explore alternative methods, like index match, which allow for more flexible vertical lookups. The basic syntax starts with an equal sign, followed by index and an open parenthesis. Inside the parenthesis, the first argument is the return range. You can think of the return range as similar to the column index number in VLOOKUP, as it specifies the range of cells, or column, from which you want to return the looked up value in a vertical lookup. The next argument is the match function. As explained in the previous video on VLOOKUP, the match function finds the position of the lookup value within a specified range. For vertical lookups, it identifies the row number where the lookup value is located. The arguments for the match function include the lookup value, which is the value you're searching for, the lookup range, which is the range where you're looking for that value, and finally, the match type argument, which is usually set to 0. Setting this to 0 tells the match function to return an exact match for the lookup value. The match function then returns the position of the lookup value within a row for vertical lookups, much like how VLOOKUP uses the lookup value as a key to find the row from which it retrieves data from another column. With that in mind, let's say we have a table that includes product names, their sales regions, the names of the associated sales representatives, quarter 1 and quarter 2 sales, and order IDs. And in a separate table, we want to find the Q1 sales figures for the different sales regions. To do this, in cell J2, we will start by typing an equal sign followed by index and an open parenthesis. Inside the parenthesis, we will specify the range of cells from which we want the function to return the desired value. Since we're interested in Q1 sales, we will set the return range as D2 to D6. Next, we will use the match function to find the position of the lookup value in the row. To do this, we'll type match followed by an open parenthesis. Inside the match function, we'll specify F2 as the lookup value, F2 to F6 as the range where we'll search for the lookup value, and finally we'll set the match type to 0 to ensure an exact match. Once that's set, we'll proceed to close both the match function and the index function with closing parentheses and hit enter. As demonstrated, we've successfully used index match to perform a vertical lookup. This approach allows us to execute lookups that VLOOKUP typically can't handle, such as when the lookup value is located to the right of the value we want to return. With that said, we'll proceed to copy the formula to the other cells, making sure to update the return range in the index function and set the lookup range in the match function to absolute references, so they remain constant as we copy the formula downward. And that wraps this tutorial in advanced VLOOKUP techniques. We've covered how to use VLOOKUP across multiple tables within the same sheet, how to apply it across multiple sheets, and even explored the powerful index match combination for more flexible lookups. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe for more tips and tricks on mastering Excel. If you have any questions or want to see more advanced topics, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.